Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. Today we'll be discussing how AWS and AWS Partner Network partners, particularly healthcare competency partners, can help you build solutions that align to regulatory frameworks such as HIPAA. So today, to get started, my name is Aaron Friedman. I am the partner technical lead for healthcare and life sciences. And I'll be your host for the moderator today. I think I jumped up a slide, so why don't I go one back? So I'm joined today by Matt Ferrari, who is the CTO of ClearDATA, and one of his customers, Josh Siegel, who is the CTO of CareCloud. Also joined today by Jerry Miller, who's the Chief Technologist and founder of Cloudticity, another AWS Healthcare Competency Partner. And one of his customers, James Lawson, who's the Chief Solutions Officer of VERGE Health. And today, we're going to sort of go through and first talk about, how AWS supports HIPAA compliant solutions on the cloud. And then we'll follow up by, really diving into how our healthcare competency partners, ClearDATA and Cloudticity, have enabled their customers to be successful. And then we'll finally follow up with some Q&A. So the goals out of this, is, how you can use AWS HIPAA Eligible Services to build healthcare solutions that align to the HIPAA regulatory framework. Understand how to build these secure solutions really while maintaining, HIPAA and HITRUST requirements. And then, really learn how to take advantage of the benefits of cloud computing for healthcare organizations, and specifically how our healthcare competency partners, ClearDATA and Cloudticity, can really enable you to do so in a very rapid way. So with that, I'd like to get started just discussing AWS and how we approach, solutions related to HIPAA. So one of the things that we've noticed really is across all industries, cloud computing has become the new normal. Organizations, regardless of industry, are deploying new applications to the cloud by default, and in a lot of cases, migrating existing applications as quickly as possible. And AWS in the last 10 or 11 years has really been committed to enabling customer success. And today, we service millions of active customers every month in over 190 countries. And we have become the fastest enterprise IT vendor in history to reach a $10 billion run rate, and it's sitting at about $16 billion today. And specific to healthcare organizations, when you think about regulated industries, many of them today are building these HIPAA compliant solutions or other types of regulated solutions on the AWS cloud. And we're going to talk today in a little bit more detail about how these customers are doing that. So, as I just said, major companies from, high-profile startups all the way to the largest enterprises are running, solutions that align to the HIPAA regulatory framework on AWS today. And what we do internally is we provide, resources to help you use our HIPAA eligible services as part of your overall cloud strategy. And I'll get into specifically what HIPAA eligible services mean in a couple slides. And then, really the reason why we're here is our healthcare competency partners and how they extend our security and compliance solutions and really serve as force multipliers for AWS to enable customer success. So I think it always, is good to start, what is our top priority here? And I think really it has been and always will be security compliance. They are job zero. And when you think about, what Lee Kim, who's the director of privacy and security at HIMSS North America, says, where, healthcare institutions don't have the time and resources to devote to cybersecurity that an established cloud provider might have, I think that speaks very well to the value proposition that AWS can bring your organization. And the way that we approach this is in several ways, but, first and foremost, it's always, listening to customers and working with customers and understanding, what security features they need and going and building and managing those. We do so and align our services to over 50 global compliance certifications and accreditations. And, when we think again across industries, the regulatory aspects making sure that our services are well adapted to suit the regulatory needs of every industry, which then, directly makes specific industries like healthcare more successful. And we do so by, giving you the ability to access a deep set of cloud security tools. And one of the most important is the Amazon Virtual Private Cloud, which is effectively a way of isolating a portion of AWS into your own private network. And you have the ability to sort of provision your network within there in the same ways you might do an on-premises data center where you're defining, subnets for different servers, et cetera. But beyond the VPC, we have a wide variety of solutions that can help you be successful. These are things like web application firewalls, certificate or key management services, native server-side encryption within a lot of our AWS services. And then also when you think about, auditing and logging and identity and access management, we provide, really fine-grained controls for you to define, what users or applications in your organization can access specific data. And then also from a, sort of compliance and logging perspective, we give you the ability to log across your entire infrastructure. So services like AWS Config allow you to track resource and inventory changes. AWS CloudTrail allows you to track throughout, pretty much all of your AWS services what the API access patterns are. Amazon CloudWatch allows you to really monitor your resources and applications both at the log level and in sort of the performance level. So if you think of things like how your servers are actually optimized and working. And then AWS Artifact is something that I think is very applicable to our industry in healthcare, where you can actually self-service AWS compliance reports, and also you can go there and self-service business associates addendums. And, along with this, we align to global certifications and sort of security attestation frameworks. So when you think about this across the globe, these are things like ISO 27001, SOC 2, but the one that we're going to focus on today specifically is in the middle, which is HIPAA. And, along with the security services that we provide to help you extend and really build robust and secure regulated applications, we provide a set of HIPAA eligible services that really span the entire framework. And when we talk about HIPAA eligible services, these are AWS services that can store, process, or transmit PHI. So these could be things like, sort of the foundational compute and storage with Amazon EC2, which is provisioning virtual servers, as well as Amazon S3, which is our massively scalable object store, as well as, a bunch of different, hosted database solutions, whether it's Oracle or Microsoft SQL Server or Postgres or MySQL. You have the ability to really use these managed services in building your HIPAA applications. We also provide big data services such as Amazon EMR, which is not, in this case, electronic medical records, but a managed Hadoop and Spark framework, or you could use our data warehouse, Amazon Redshift. So the key thing to take away here is that throughout our service ecosystem, you have the ability to really use the entire AWS service suite in order to maximize the utility that you provide your customers with HIPAA, with regards to HIPAA. And beyond that, really, one of the things that I love doing and love working with are AWS Healthcare Competency Partners. And we view these competency partners as true force multipliers. And these partners have demonstrated success in building solutions to help healthcare providers and payers securely store, process, transmit, and analyze clinical information. AWS Healthcare Competency Partners are our most advanced partners on AWS in this space. In addition to undergoing sort of an additional technical validation for their solution, we look at repeated success within their customers and look for partners that share our own philosophy of customer obsession. And I'm really happy to be joined today by two of those stellar partners, which are ClearDATA and Cloudticity. And I'd love for you in the next 30 minutes to learn more. So Matt, take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate it. So today what we wanted to talk about is really how do we ensure compliance and security of this critical healthcare data, as Aaron referenced. Oftentimes that is HIPAA-based protected health information. So with me today, I have the CTO of CareCloud, Josh Siegel. Josh and I have known each other for quite a few years now, and I want him to really tell you his story and his journey of how he has really brought CareCloud to AWS in a compliant environment. As for myself, I have the opportunity of being the CTO of ClearDATA. ClearDATA is a healthcare exclusive organization focused on compliance and security, specifically on AWS. And from a background perspective, I run our product development team and our product strategy team. So a lot of what I do day to day is consume AWS futures and resources and think about how do we solve problems in healthcare specifically. Speaking of problems, here's why it's really important to stay secure and compliant. Just 3 quick stats. Based off of the National Center for Health Statistics, the 3rd leading cause of death in the US are medical errors. And based off of Forbes report in 2015, 112 million medical records were compromised in 215 million alone, or in 2015 alone. And candidly, not even my children have been compromised over the past year and a half. And so a very emotional and passionate mission that both myself and our friends at Cloudticity are on here. And then the 3rd, 75% surveyed healthcare organizations either have their PHI data already in the cloud or they anticipated migrating to cloud in the near future. I have the opportunity of meeting with providers and payers and pharmaceutical companies every week. And truthfully, healthcare organizations that have not built a cloud strategy are smaller and smaller each and every day. So how can we make sure that this data remains compliant throughout the life cycle of that patient record being in existence? With that, I'd like to hand it over to Josh here so that he can tell the story about CareCloud, and then I'll be back with you in a couple minutes.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, and thanks for everybody that joined online. So obviously, cloud is baked into our name, right? We're CareCloud. Our role, we really see our position in the market is to bring HIPAA-compliant cloud solutions to our medical practices and their patients. And that comes in the form of practice management software, electronic medical records, and patient engagement, patient experience management. That's all served up and accessed 100% in the cloud. As folks have mentioned, as Jerry mentioned, security and compliance really is job zero when it comes to managing healthcare data. Obviously, that's why we're all here today. But when it comes to customers like ours, our practices don't necessarily have access to the same expertise in terms of data security, compliance, audit, and assessment, and kind of the rigor of controls that gets layered in at every step in the process that the folks are talking about, right? You think about the best of breed security controls and auditability that Amazon Web Services is bringing to bear. I mean, that's better than what we could offer out of our own managed data centers, here at CareCloud if we were trying to do that ourselves. And obviously much better than what an individual or large group medical practice could afford on their own or manage on their own. And then you layer in on that the compliance expertise and experience using the Amazon compliant web services that ClearDATA brings to the picture. And that's really how we're trying to bring it all together and bring this best of breed capability to our customers. Our core mission is to provide the best possible access to patient data and information for our providers so they can provide the best care possible, right? That is the point of electronic medical records. There's several limitations when you come to addressing that from a technology perspective, where if you're managing at multiple co-locations or you're deploying physical servers, maybe at the practice location, the sharing and the access of those data is challenging, and you're dealing with uptime and also access and compliance. On Matt's previous slide, he mentioned the breach numbers. The other thing that is tragic in the way that IT management happens around HIPAA data is one of the most common sources of breach is actually the loss of redundant media, like you made a backup tape or a backup drive, and simply losing documented record of the location of that media would constitute a breach. When you're able to move out of that physical space management problem and move this up to the cloud and take advantage of the services that Amazon and MSPs like ClearDATA offer under their business associate, we're really able to focus more on our core business and know that from a compliance standpoint that we have those bases covered in a way that meets everything that's necessary under HIPAA. One of the things that's interesting is from our perspective that I think is kind of unique to what CareCloud brought to our migration story. To how were we going to get to Amazon? How was ClearDATA going to help us make that transition? We are a healthcare IT company, right? So we have our own DevOps team. We have our own developers. We are primarily a SaaS software company that is providing these capabilities to our practices and patients. So we're able to handle a fair portion of this CI/CD process, and we had a fairly mature build process. But what was, kind of the secret sauce that bringing ClearDATA into the mix allowed us to do is we're able to bake in these compliance controls in terms of having a certified and validated Amazon machine image that has all of the monitoring tools essentially baked into that hardened Amazon machine image, which is called an AMI. It's an easy way of deploying either a virtual machine image on EC2 or Docker containers. We ended up adopting a Docker container fleet approach with ClearDATA. But essentially, we're able to have that same compliance instance that we use throughout our development lifecycle. So the same compliance controls get applied in our development environment, which is running in a lockdown VPC, running on those hardened machine images with all of the necessary network controls, just like production. The difference is here that CareCloud's DevOps and engineers can access those environments. When it comes to promoting that code to production, though, as we're talking about HIPAA, a lot of larger organizations, especially under the new MACRA guidance, right, we're held under a much higher level of auditability and compliance controls in those production environments. So what this partnership with ClearDATA lets us do is we can have separate VPCs, those are hosted in Amazon, managed by ClearDATA, where our entire platform can essentially be promoted as certified, immutable, compliant, tested code that ClearDATA can then, be the remote hands that where we make this transition, where they're actually the ones that are responsible for any of our environments that contain PHI. They're the ones, in tight control of those networks, servers, and all of the monitoring that happens there. What we're looking for, right, and what MSPs like ClearDATA and the advantage of going with a cloud leader like Amazon Web Services lets us do is we can focus really on the innovation, and then like myself as a business leader on the technology side, or our tech ops leads and our DevSecOps, there's a variety of tools that Matt will go deep on kind of how ClearDATA does all this, but as we're talking about, there's a bunch of Amazon services that are all HIPAA compliant. They're all outputting lots of information that would be relevant from a compliance standpoint, but for us to make sense of all of this, there's a great opportunity for tools like what ClearDATA is giving to us so that we can really focus on our core business of offering innovation, driving value for our providers and patients, and then we have a full team behind us that really is focused solely on managing compliance controls and making those controls visible to us as a business. Matt, you want to tell everybody how it's done?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I appreciate it. So Aaron mentioned earlier in the presentation around some of the services that are eligible at this time. And as we think about the evolution of AWS, more and more services are becoming eligible on a consistent basis. And as Josh mentioned, it became really clear to someone like ClearDATA that how can we help a healthcare organization that maybe doesn't have all of the expertise to keep up with the Joneses on the amazing Amazon innovation side of the house? How can we help those organizations understand that they remain compliant? And so about 2 years ago, actually at HIMSS, we launched our compliance dashboard, and we continue to iterate on that in a kind of a biweekly Scrum process every couple of weeks as new services become eligible. And so I wanted to give you a bit of a view into that. If we can, there we go. So this is a picture of our compliance dashboard. As we think about the problems in the market, we really wanted to focus on some of the challenges, right? Really, how does a provider, as an example, understand their regulatory needs? How do things like technologies around vulnerability scans and malware and antivirus, how does that actually affect HIPAA guidelines and HITRUST guidelines and those kind of things? The second is the challenge is really kind of lack of transparency back to the business. It's really easy to say, hey, my environment has been certified. I have used all of the guidance, the white papers, the technologies are in place. But when changes happen inside of the environment, maybe it's a new clinic that opens up where you need to set up new VPNs or new network connectivity or new firewall rules. How does this affect my compliance stance? And how does my CIO know that what was deployed a month ago is still in that compliance kind of rigor? One of the amazing things about Josh's platform, as he explained to you, is Josh is able to, through their automation pipeline, tear down and redeploy code as they continue to develop new innovation inside of their organization. But truthfully, most healthcare organizations aren't quite there yet, right? Providers and payers, many of them are still running traditional Windows, Linux workloads, and they need to know if they're compliant on a consistent basis, even when an auditor comes knocking. And as we kind of think about how does that look, how does that work, what you'll see is kind of at a glance reporting, if you will. So more in-depth reporting about mapping back to specific regs or specific Code of Federal Regulation items as it maps back to HIPAA. And we've also recently expanded for some life sciences workloads like GMP and GXP, so that healthcare organizations can see at an individual Amazon instance level, and even at a container cluster level, if you are a consumer of technologies like AWS ECS, how compliant based off of your current environment am I? And all of this is downloadable so that you can download it into PDF form and you can show it to your assessor, you can show it to your auditor. And what we've seen is healthcare organizations are able to mitigate a lot of their risk. Candidly, ClearDATA actually built this for ourselves. We were going through our own HITRUST assessment. We needed to focus on how can we prove it to ourselves that we're living the policies, the procedures, and ultimately the values as you think about security and compliance being the lifeblood of kind of the healthcare IT organization. How do we make sure that we're actually living it every single day? And so we built it for ourselves, and we continue to expand it from a reporting perspective. It's a very different concept than what you're used to, because you're probably used to, for an IT professional, looking at security dashboards, right? What does my performance look like? Is everything running up to speed? Have my servers been patched? And sure, for compliance, some of that is valid, but some of it is taking a little bit of a different aspect and seeing how is it seen in the eyes of HIPAA, and how is it seen in the eyes of other regulations out there. As we think about compliance trends and onboarding, one of the things that organizations like ClearDATA do is they show an ongoing, let's say, culture of compliance. So how compliant am I over time, knowing that most healthcare organizations and most organizations in general aren't always going to be at that 100% mark. But really the value here is, am I getting better? Am I trending up? Where do I need to focus gaps in my organization from a security or compliance perspective? A recent example that I've run into is an organization that wasn't doing consistent vulnerability scans inside of their organization. So able to see by trend, hey, my application hasn't gone through its rigorous code scan after a period of time. My trend score specifically for application compliance has dipped. I need to prioritize that in my weekly stand-ups. And so we've seen a lot of benefits there. The other thing I'll tell you on this slide is really around onboarding. Aaron mentioned technologies like Identity and Access Management, or AWS IAM. Organizations like ClearDATA here have built out the ability to onboard these tools directly into your own environment. So as I think about the future of healthcare, and as I think about the future of healthcare with AWS, a lot of my thoughts are around the maturity of healthcare organizations internally. And while there is a tremendous ecosystem that is asking for help, there's also an ecosystem that is saying, hey, I'm starting to mature in my own understanding of cloud technologies. Give me an easy way to onboard and an easy way to offer up your capabilities or your compliance intellectual property inside of my AWS account, and allow me to understand where my risks are and allow me to have my security team engage. So as we think about the future of even ClearDATA, we're announcing a new solution in the near term, and we're extending that compliance dashboard offering to the marketplace. And we're going to be launching our compliance dashboard to both existing AWS customers that are already using Amazon and are worried about things like breaches and security incidents, but also organizations that are looking to do it on their own. And so what you'll see in the near term is we're expanding it just for that use case so that you'll actually be able to consume this directly in the marketplace. Finally, I'll tell you, one of the interesting things that I get to see every day is this is a common problem. Not only are breaches and security incidents continuing to increase over time in healthcare, but the truth is healthcare organizations, as Aaron mentioned in his earlier quote, simply aren't equipped from a staffing perspective, from a visibility perspective, and as you're about to hear from Cloudticity, from a managed service perspective, they're just not equipped to be able to innovate, to be able to take care of their patients, their doctors, their nurses' lives at the end of the day, and continue to maintain rigor around security and compliance. My contact information is here, as well as Josh. I'd like to thank each of you for the time. As I pass it off here, I will tell you, I'm really excited to hear from a fellow partner. So I'd like to pass the baton off to Jerry Miller, the Chief Technologist and founder of Cloudticity.
Great, thanks Matt. Thanks Josh, and thanks everyone for attending. I'm really excited to tell you a little bit about Cloudticity and a whole lot about our customer VERGE Health's journey to AWS. So my name is Jerry Miller. I'm the founder of Cloudticity. We help healthcare organizations design, build, migrate, and manage HIPAA compliant solutions on AWS. I'm joined today by James Lawson, the Chief Solutions Officer at VERGE Health. You'll hear directly from James that their key business and technical drivers that led VERGE to consider a move out of their data center. You'll hear the specific criteria by which they chose AWS, the measurable business results they achieved almost immediately after migration, and I'm going to dive into a fair amount of detail around how we executed the migration, including HIPAA-specific considerations and how we help VERGE manage their AWS environment on an ongoing basis. Before I turn it over to James, let me just tell you a little bit of background about Cloudticity. For the past 6 years, we focused exclusively on ensuring our healthcare clients are successful on AWS. We're an AWS Advanced Partner. We have the distinction of being an audited managed services provider. There are tens of thousands of AWS partners worldwide, and only a handful have reached this achievement because it requires a rigorous third-party audit. I'm very proud of my team. They actually achieved the only 100% perfect score on that audit. We've also earned the AWS Healthcare and DevOps competencies, which also require third-party audits, as well as several service delivery partner distinctions for work with AWS services such as EC2 Systems Manager and Service Catalog. Of course, we're HITRUST certified as well. We'll talk a bit more about Cloudticity Oxygen, which is our purpose-built managed services platform, specifically designed to help reinvent managed services for healthcare's digital era. We focus on management and monitoring, security and operations center, and continuous compliance. Throughout the presentation, I hope you hear continuously how automation really is at the center of everything that we do. And it's our passion for our healthcare clients and really their clients and patients that drives us every day. So I'd love to tell you a bit more about what we've done, but I ask James to start by talking a little bit about Verge Health and some of the challenges that they were experiencing when they began to eventually embark on the journey to AWS. So James, over to you.
Thanks, Jerry. I appreciate it. I'm James Lawson, Chief Solutions Officer of Verge Health. I'm responsible for products and technology. Really excited to be here today to talk about our journey to AWS and leveraging our partner Cloudticity. Quickly, and talk a little bit about Verge Health, and while I understand that the intent here is not for us to talk a whole lot about what Verge Health is and what we do, I think it's extraordinarily important to understand what we do because of the challenges around migrating to the cloud. So Verge Health is really a GRC, a governance, risk, and compliance for healthcare systems company. So what we do is document events, potential adverse events, all the way through to a hospital claim or a liability management system. We cover all of those components as well as doing employee credentialing and peer review. So when we are looking at actually our components are helping people who are actually doing the healthcare job, making sure that their processes are right to have great outcomes. You guys saw in some of the prior slides about the industry and how much hurt and harm is caused by healthcare, unfortunately. And what we do is actually work through those processes to enable our customers to achieve high reliability in their healthcare delivery. And of course, in order to do that, we need to deliver highly reliable systems. So we've been around for about 10 years. We can back up just one slide there real quick. We've been around for about 10 years. We've got 900 hospital system clients, about 14,000 providers monthly, 500,000 active users, and about 17 million active actions managed. So we have a large footprint. In looking at where we were from last year, we had a singular question there: how do we modernize our single on-premises data center that does not have physical redundancy? And really make sure that we can protect that data and deal with the 900 customers that we have on the Converge platform. So if you look at those challenges, if we start off last year, we were in a single data center, and that single data center, while we did have redundancy within that data center, as you guys probably know, that's not the greatest solution because if something happens to that physical plant, there's a big issue there. And much like many other software companies that have grown up over many years, we've been around for 10 years, and those changes were made. They grew that company in this company in such a way that really the forethought about having physical redundancy in separate geological or geographic locations wasn't really primary for us. Well, for us with 900 customers that use our system on a day-to-day basis, we must have that type of redundancy. In addition, we have lots of patient data that must be protected. So as we look at that from a HIPAA perspective, and we'll talk a little bit more about this as well, that data, we have data for when things bad happen in a hospital and how that process is being taken care of. That data is extraordinarily important to not only the hospital, but to the patients and externally, right? In addition, we didn't, from a traditional data center process, that did not fit with migrating our systems and our teams really from an agile perspective. So having things in a logical data center and having to, fire up physical hardware didn't really meet our agile processes. And more importantly, we don't really want to be in the hardware business. We want to focus on what we do best, and that is leveraging our resources in developing and deploying industry-leading software. And anytime we spend any amount of time, whether it's a FTE or $1 on that other activity, we're not doing what we should be doing on the other side. In addition, from an AWS perspective or from a cloud perspective, the scalability was extraordinarily important to us. Our ability to actually scale up was something that we look forward to in the future as we bring on lots and lots of customers, or even a large customer that has a large geographic footprint where we bring on 14,000 providers, for example. We have to be able to just scale up. And then, of course, the bottom line for everything, right, is cost. Looking at the cost of how we were going to do this from a multiple redundant center perspective, we understood that was a need that we had to get to. But the cost of actually deploying bare metal to different locations is significant and something that we had to look at as well. So for us, actually, back up, I'm sorry. Actually, for us, that decision process there, we had a few different pieces of that decision process that we had to go through. First off was really whether or not we wanted to go to the cloud. right? And looking at that, we very lucky, and unlike others, and unlike some other software companies that I've been a party to in the past, we actually were already deploying things through the cloud at that point. They were just through managed servers in different locations. So we already had the benefit of being a SaaS solution from day one, whereas some other companies I've been in before have had on-premise solutions. So, you know, for us looking at that, we actually already started as a SaaS. So we had a decision whether we wanted to go to the least traditional owned or move fully to the cloud through Amazon Web Services or another cloud vendor. The next piece of that decision process was looking at whether or not it was going to be AWS or another provider. There are many out there. One of the things I will say, you know, we're a Microsoft stack, so I think Microsoft also had kind of a leg up there because some of the components and tools that they had in place made it a lot or significantly easy to do that. But after a pretty large amount of look and determination, we decided to go with Amazon Web Services because of the breadth of what they could offer, and quite frankly, just the amazing amount of opportunity within their stack. Also, our other decision process was, you know, as we look at this, we wanted to do this and have minimal impact with secure data. Why we have to figure out who would do that with us as a partner, because certainly my staff, and just like everybody else out there, you don't have a lot of staff that are just sitting around waiting for stuff to do. So we leveraged Cloudticity. After lots and lots of background checks, different providers, they had great references, and specifically the experience with HIPAA that they had. And then also, I think Jerry mentioned before, their component of being audited AWS and managed services provider was a big choice for us in making sure that this move that we had to do was successful, because, you know, from my standpoint, when you have 900 customers like this and you're making a foundational change to where you're hosted, that is an opportunity to have a major problem. So we did select them because they had been through that so many times, and we thought we would hedge our bets with that success. So I'm going to pass it back to Jerry for a moment to talk a little bit about that migration process.
Great, James. Thank you so much. As I briefly touched on earlier, Cloudticity Oxygen is the key to our ability to deliver HIPAA compliance to our clients at scale. Our approach to managed services is simple. We know that computers do things more reliably and more predictably than humans. And we know that in a regulated environment, that predictability is one of the keys to maintaining compliance, because you know that things will happen the same way each and every time. And you know that that you're taking the humans out of the chain of execution, which reduces the chance for error. At Cloudticity, we call this preferring silicon over carbon. As a born-in-the-cloud company, we've never been saddled with legacy infrastructure, processes, or thinking. And so we don't directly solve customers' problems. We write code that solves our customers' problems. And, you know, some evidence on the effectiveness of that is right now, if we look at our you know, for example, our help desk ticketing system, more than half of our help desk tickets are resolved through automation, and that number gets better every day. So we're leveraging advanced technologies such as machine learning to keep our clients secure, highly available, reliably performant, and always cost optimized. So let's talk in some detail about the VERGE specific migration process. We went through three main sections. So we gathered information, we coded the environment, and then we deployed. And I use the word coded the environment very deliberately, and we'll talk in great detail around that. But so the process of gathering information, you know, through a variety of tools and templates that we provide, we began to derive a complete inventory of the current environment. Now that's a pretty comprehensive process. So that involves things like network topology, network traffic flow, firewall rules, VPN connections, a deep dive on things like storage. So, you know, what's allocated versus what's really being used. What are the patterns of use of the storage? Is it more archival or long-term, or is it immediate access? Is it shared access or local to an individual server? And then speaking of servers, obviously we had to inventory all existing servers, everything down to operating system versions, patch levels, software installed, OS configuration, software configuration. So that was a pretty comprehensive process. We also had to look at some underlying business requirements. And so things like, what are the logging requirements? What's the archival requirements? What are the document retention policies? Where does PHI exist? Where we need to know exactly where protected health information is and where it goes so that we can identify appropriate encryption mechanisms both at rest and in transit. We also looked at business requirements such as RTO and RPO and SLAs so that we could derive good DR strategies and cutover requirements. Once we had all this information, we could codify it in code. And this is one of the most important things that I want people to take away from this webinar, is that when you deploy on a cloud service such as AWS, you don't have to go and configure things manually. Unlike a data center where you procure servers and the truck pulls up and you pull the boxes out and you unbox them and you rack them and you burn them in. None of this applies in the cloud world. And because you deploy 100% of your infrastructure, if you're doing it the right way, using code. And so we coded the infrastructure. We used CloudFormation, which is an AWS template language that allows you to define every last bit about what the environment looks like, from the networking configuration to the network traffic flow allowed, to what servers are there, to how do things auto-scale. So the entire environment was codified with CloudFormation. The second thing is we codified all the configuration and application deployment using Chef, so that when we ran the CloudFormation templates and we ran the Chef cookbooks, the entire environment stood itself up. There were certain things that we optimized. We didn't want to take a pure lift and shift approach. We had a pretty hard deadline. It was a less than 90 days process, so we couldn't fully optimize, but we did things like optimize SQL clusters for SQL Server, because in the data center they used things like shared storage, which isn't available on AWS. So we migrated that, for example, to SQL Server Enterprise with always-on availability groups and replication. We had to refactor things like NAS for shared storage. And we refactored certain areas where it became more optimal, for example, to use an object store such as S3 or a long-term store such as Glacier versus Elastic Block Store. So one of the really interesting outputs of that was as we were deploying, for example, the Palo Alto VM series next-gen firewalls that protects all ingress and egress of traffic for VERGE, we realized that Palo Alto firewalls out of the box didn't support high availability and automated failover. And so jointly with VERGE, we built a solution that was unique enough that Palo Alto Networks invited us to present it at their recent user conference this summer. And we ended up open sourcing that solution. So finally, when that was ready, we began the deployment process. So the main thing now, because we had the environment built in code, we had to start syncing data. So we looked at things like existing file-based or object-based data, which we could sync using rsync. We looked at database data, which we either synced with dumps and restores, or setting up asynchronous replication to analogous clusters on AWS. VERGE Health Solution has a number of VPN connections to their customers, and so we used a concentrated solution called pPro to be able to very quickly switch large numbers of VPN connections. So ultimately, when the actual cutover took place, it became almost a non-event, and we held our breath and we changed the host name, and it just worked. So given that, we then moved on to the phase of sort of post-deployment optimization. So here, from Cloudticity's perspective, we focused on doing things that began to leverage cloud-native services to help VERGE Health better take advantage of agility services like AWS Service Catalog, so that their employees could do self-service provisioning, but still wrapped in sort of the bubble wrap of good governance and compliance. We analyzed the running environment and right-sized it so that EC2 instances were the correct size, not too big, not too small. We identified things like environments, like dev environments that might not be used at night, and we began to do things like automatically turn them off. We identified the right set of reserved instances that VERGE could pre-purchase, all of which helped dramatically drive costs down based on actual usage. I know that VERGE Health did a number of post-migration optimizations as well, so I'll turn it back to James to talk about that and then to wrap up with some of the business results that they experienced.
Sure. Thanks, Jerry. So if you look at the slide here, we also, our ability to, in the marketplace, talk about our solutions and leveraging the AWS security model and SOC certifications really allowed us to have IT as an asset for us. So whereas before that may have been a little bit of a challenge, especially in a single data center location, IT is now an asset for us, kind of a leading edge of that as well. So, we are able to walk in and say, hey, we have robust cloud security through AWS. our best practice implementation, secure data with vendor consolidation, and of course on that SaaS platform. So really, what does this all mean for VERGE Health? If we look at why did we do this and what does this mean operationally? Jerry mentioned in 90 days, we really affected a wholesale change to the way we deploy our software. We moved hundreds of servers, VPNs, and terabytes of data without really any interruption to our customers. Last week, we had our user conference in Charleston, and many of our users were in there, and I was able to ask the question if anyone had really noticed that we had gone to AWS and looking at here's all of the amazing things that were done, and only a few people even had any inkling that we had actually done this, which is a great testament when you have 900 hospitals using your system, that they didn't know that. We've really been able to leap forward several generations in security and threat prevention, talking about the stuff we've done with Palo Alto, as well as securing this data from a very HIPAA-centric idea from a compliance perspective. Those things that are kind of non-tangible but really, really important, we are now able to spin up different environments for quick hit projects, potential proof of concepts with really very little effort, and most importantly there, standardization. So whereas before we would have to set up a server and something may not be working, now it's a click of a button. Done the same way every time. And as you know from everything else in many other industries, standardization is what's primarily important when you're doing the same repetitive task over and over. So by able to stand those servers up with a button push, they're going to look just like the one you did yesterday. So no more looking for why things are different and what's not working. So those setup issues just go away. In thinking about that, what used to take days, weeks, or months now just takes moments. And that is huge to quantify when you're talking about developing best quality solutions. So really, we are leveraging technology for those best practices, and we're also using containerization and microservices around that so that we can do the best job we can with the resources that we have. Kind of going back to the other point we made before, we do what we do best, develop and deploy industry-leading software instead of managing environments around that. I think it's really important too is that with using AWS and also Cloudticity, we have full visibility into our daily, hourly spend, really by project. We can generate a P&L per product with associated expenses. That's extraordinarily important so that we can figure out what makes us money and what doesn't, and look forward for costing as well for specific products as well. And lastly, I'll leave you with, from a Cloudticity perspective, Jerry and his team, they continue on with us, and we actually treat them as though they're part of our team. So where they're not really a vendor with us, they're on daily calls. Potentially, we have Slack channels that we have open. We talk with them on a routine basis, and they function very much as a collaborative partner versus just a vendor for us.
Great. Well, thanks so much, James, and thanks everyone for letting us take some time out of your day. I turn it back to Aaron, and I think we're going to move into a Q&A section.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thanks first off to James and Jerry and Josh and Matt for taking some time today. First and foremost, to learn more about, these solutions, you can, go to the link provided here, as well as, highly recommend if you are going to reInvent next month, both Cloudticity and ClearDATA will be diving deeper into some of the technical implementations of their solutions as well. If you happen to be there at our Healthcare and Life Sciences pre-day on November 27th, you can learn more from a technical perspective and or follow it up on YouTube. But for now, I'd like to jump to Q&A and address some of the outstanding the remaining questions. Again, we're not going to be able to necessarily get to everything, but we will be following up personally via email for these. So the first question I have for Matt is, can the compliance dashboard show database security, container security, VM security, and cluster security all in one slide?
That's a great question. It can, yeah. So recent example, we all know that there's ongoing improvements from an eligibility and a service perspective for database technologies like RDS on top of AWS. The dashboard absolutely expands in that way. Typically, there's new functions that are added on the AWS ClearDATA side. I want to say every 2 to 3 weeks. Definitely expands into specific security around things like the database layer, the VM layer, and the container layer. You know, interestingly enough, last year at HIMSS, or I guess this past year at HIMSS, we launched the compliance dashboard on top of ECS, so showing kind of continuous security and compliance on top of a container-based platform on Amazon. So yeah, you can see it all in one view. You can customize your view, and most recently, you can now roll up your individual instances or VMs or security groups into kind of a single application or a single view. This way, you get more of a high-level score rather than just at the individual instance level.
Perfect. And you know, a question for James and Jerry that just came in is, you know, so obviously, James, you mentioned that VERGE is primarily a Windows shop in terms of your stack. And the question was, did VERGE change over to Linux servers after moving to AWS?
We didn't fully move over. We do have some components there, but again, we would still classify ourselves primarily as a Windows shop.
That's great. And yeah, and to sort of follow up on that, you know, one of the key things is we are 100% committed to making AWS the best place to run Windows workloads in the cloud. And, you know, we have, you know, myriad customers across all industries doing this. One of the recent things to help enable this further is recently our Amazon RDS, or Managed Database Service offering, onboarded the Microsoft SQL, so SQL Server edition 2008 on to our HIPAA program, so you can actually use, you know, SQL Server to run HIPAA workloads on RDS SQL Server as well. One of the other sort of questions, you know, for Jerry is, all clients we had before we migrated to AWS had many concerns about their data in the cloud with multiple levels of sign-off. How did Cloudticity manage to migrate without notifying their client base beforehand?
Yes. So I guess would the question be related to notifying the underlying like VERGE's clients or not? If that would be the case.
Kind of sounds like what they're asking. So, you know, from our standpoint, this is James. From our standpoint, I don't believe there's anything, in at least our contracts, that specified, and we spent a lot of time on this and had lots of discussions. If in fact we were going backwards in regards to security, I think it would have made a lot of difference. We actually did have a couple of conversations with some very high-profile customers who were looking for more than what we were providing for them as a vendor, right? And saying that, hey, here's some of the security components that we're about to put in place. So I guess I probably should have said it a little differently, that we did have some notification and some talks about that, but no one was negatively impacted in order to say, hey, something happened and we were offline, so that's the issue. We did have a lot of conversations with customers, specifically larger customers who were looking for more than potentially we could give them with our current data center, and some of those very specific customers, and every one of them was met with, that's fantastic, and especially when you start looking at Amazon Web Services and how their SOC 2, et cetera, SOC 3 pieces, it's very easy for them to explain that, hey, we're going to make things a lot better for you and a lot more secure. So there's really no sign-off needed for that kind of a move.
Most of our clients view having their systems on AWS as a strategic differentiator against their competitors, and they prominently highlight that in their marketing materials. So across the board, we're seeing AWS viewed as a net positive in terms of security.
Wonderful. So I want to, you know, I know we have a lot of questions, and we will follow up with everyone internally, or not internally. We'll follow up with everyone via email. And I think I want to close on this question because it's one that I've heard a lot from customers and general questions, and I think it speaks well to the value proposition of both ClearDATA and Cloudticity, which is, are AWS services going to be HITRUST certified too? Is there a plan around getting HITRUST? One of the things that we've noticed is with regards to HITRUST is our customers and partners are doing this in spades, and two of which that have gone through the full HITRUST certification process are ClearDATA and Cloudticity. So I'd like to give, just 30 seconds. I know we're running out of time, but maybe Matt and then Jerry can just sort of speak to that process really quickly and how that went.
Sure. So clearly we've both been through HITRUST, and there's lots of lessons learned. here's some interesting things about HITRUST. ClearDATA went through the process in 2014, and the process has a midterm. So every other year, you are going through kind of an assessment to make sure you're living up to the policies, procedures around HITRUST. And then in that second year, you go through a recertification process. But look, there's some amazing things that are happening in HITRUST. One of which is there's the new CSF version 9 and soon to be 9.1, which are going to do things like encapsulate some of the compliance regs and some of the guidelines for things like FedRAMP and the upcoming GDPR. So organizations like Cloudticity and ClearDATA are really focusing on being able to encapsulate for the healthcare organization has become really critical for the business. And Jerry, I don't know what you want to add on there.
I agree 100%, Matt, with what you said, and I'm sure Matt can attest as well. That process, while rigorous and sometimes painful, made us a better company, and I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Perfect. With that, I know we have. We'll get to all the outstanding questions. You'll receive follow-ups from us over email in the next few days. I wanted to take this time again to thank you all for joining. I hope you found it valuable, and to thank our our presenters and Matt and Jerry and Josh and James for taking the time out of their day to show. And I know there were some other questions about slides and if the slides will be visible after. We will be posting on SlideShare and as well as a recording of this presentation. So please stay tuned. You'll receive follow-ups with that via email as well in the upcoming days. And with that, I want to thank you guys again and have a wonderful rest of your Thursday.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.